Today's going to be all about programming that transfers, mastering structure, stimulus, and simplicity with Everfit's Master Planner. And one thing I always like to start off anytime I present is really today's just getting you to rethink your own approach. I'm definitely not a guy that's like, hey, this is the way it should be done, or this is the way it's done. I think there's, 200 ways to skin a cat. I'm just showing you what has resonated with me and what I found works is most successful with the client demographic that I primarily work with, which is 99% of the clients that we all primarily work with, right? So as we move on, again, just kind of keep that in context. I'm not telling you this is the way it should be done. Again, I just want y'all to hopefully have some takeaways that you can apply to your own practice. So we'll kick it off. Takeaways here, all right? I always like to make those very clear. Even a big thing that we find is we always like to say random workouts get random results, right? So we start programming and we create structure. But what I notice with a lot of clients is, or a lot of coaches, is they think that just adding, just programming or proactively programming your workouts ahead of time, that they're still programming. They're actually adding structure. But really what we're doing is we're still just adding a lot of noise. Okay. So today we're going to talk about how still a majority of coaches and trainers are entertaining instead of programming and what we can do to overcome that. We're going to talk about clear principles, make for less noise and more flexibility, right? Again, what we're trying to do is hone in on the stimuli or the stimulus that are going to most effectively move the needle based on what we're trying to do with the client, moving them from point A to point B. The stimulus is just that bridge that takes them from where they are to where they want to be. We're also going to talk about progressive overload because I find that it's very much something that is thought about very unilaterally, and we tend to focus only on a few ways. So we're definitely going to challenge that and also bring to the forefront some other ways that we can think about progressive overload outside of just increasing sets, increasing reps, or increasing load. We'll also talk about the importance of prioritizing the stimulus over the exercise. All right. Big thing is we're not married to exercises, we're married to stimuli, because stimuli are really going to be the things that move the needle for our clients. We're going to talk about how to put your clients in buckets in order to create the ability to individualize at scale. Master planner bridges strategy and execution. So we'll talk about the master planner and how to use both the day-to-day and week-to-week feature, especially when we're thinking about managing fatigue from an acute perspective as far as day-to-day and more of a chronic perspective as far as week-to-week and phase-to-phase. We're going to talk about the difference between coaching and programming because there very much is a difference. And then how great programming is clear, consistent, and at the most important is reproducible. All right. That's really what we're trying to do. So let's get right into it. So a big problem, again, is most coaches and trainers aren't programming, you're entertaining. Okay. Even when we add structure, even when we get this really dope, really cool Excel spreadsheet, if you're like me, when I first got into training 13 years ago, right? Like I'm hard. I love making dope Excel spreadsheets. That stuff was my bread and butter. But what I also didn't realize is I was still creating noise within my programming. All right. So what's happening is the reason entertainment-based coaching fails is because randomness sells, but it doesn't scale. And when I talk about that, what I mean is you're not creating a reproducible approach. And when I talk about you're entertaining, I'm talking about there is no consistent theme with how you approach the development of strength or the development of fat loss or the development of power, whatever you focus on, whether it's clients who are more on the fat loss hypertrophy side of things, or if you're someone like me who is more on the performance side of things, or even those of you who are in the middle and kind of combine both approaches. What happens is we can't pick a consistent theme. If you look at your programming, let's talk about you have 10 fat loss clients. What's happening is if you pick 10 fat loss clients and you look at all their programs, you're unable to find a consistent theme that shows up in every single program. So while you're adding structure, you're still just creating noise. You can't pick a consistent theme. So that randomness, it sells, but that approach is not scalable, especially if you're wanting to get to the 30, to the 45, to the 60 client range. We need to create something that is reproducible and allows us to kind of overcome that paralysis by analysis. Inconsistent inputs equals unpredictable outcomes. You're approaching power a different way every single time. You're approaching strength a different way every single time. You're approaching fat loss a different way every single time. So you're creating inconsistent outputs and you can't create a reproducible approach that can produce predictable outcomes. That's what this is all about. And that's what today's going to be about. Now, structure and systems matter. So I really like, I know you got the McDonald's logo. I always really like this idea, right? When you go to McDonald's, you always know what you are going to get. You always know the ice cream machine is going to be broken, but no matter what, you know the burger that you're going to get. You know the chicken nuggets that you're going to get. You always know exactly what you're going to get. For me, if you're from LA, I used to love this restaurant called Great White. Great White always put out this fire breakfast burrito. Something happened. They blew up. They scaled. Next thing you know, consistency went out the door. I was either getting a great breakfast burrito or I was getting a trash breakfast burrito. And that absolutely killed my experience. I never knew what to expect and I completely stopped going. So what we're trying to do when we're creating our business, we're creating our program design, is we're trying to create consistency. Your client always knows that when we are in a fat loss phase, it's going to involve short rest periods. It's going to involve maybe higher volumes. However, whatever your philosophy or fitness, unique belief in fitness when it comes to fat loss, hypertrophy, strength, etc. All right. Exactly. The fall of Dialogue Cafe, Parker. We're trying to create consistency. And that's something that McDonald's has been able to do no matter what. You can take whatever manager is out and you can put anybody in, and that system and that burger is still going to come out the exact same. So what we're trying to do when we're creating our systems is I want you to pretend that you're building a system and you're building an approach that can exist and still perform at a high level without you. Because if you are the unique thing, if you're the unique thing, then you haven't really created a system or a structure. We want to think about, as we're scaling our business, we want to think about designing an approach to program design where you could teach it to somebody else, step back, and it would still be just as effective. It would still be just as scalable. But right now, 99.9% of the people in this room don't have that. We want to be able to develop that. I don't even know if I'm going to sell my business one day. All right. I have a problem, right? Like I absolutely love this stuff, but I'm building my business with the idea that I will sell it one day, so that I'm thinking about the way that I structure and design my system so that it can still perform at a high level without me present. Systems also support scale. All right. So it helps help more people and make more money without sacrificing quality. So for me right now, or just in general, when we're scaling, we don't want to sacrifice quality. So we're always thinking about how can we scale and still maintain quality. So the design and implementation of a system is all about getting to a point where you're like, oof, 20 clients. 20 clients is my max right now. I can't get beyond that. Once I get above 20 clients, the quality goes down. Okay, so we've got a bottleneck. What is that bottleneck? That's what we're always building, refining, building, refining, building, refining. I always want you to think about your business. You're always working in it or you're working on it. So we're spending time working in it after we've worked on it as far as designing our systems. We work in it, we figure out the bottlenecks, step back, and we work on it. So we always want to create a dichotomy between rules, principles, and systems. Because a big thing that I constantly hear, right, is systems over principles. And it's this great philosophy, but respectfully, I disagree, only because that is only true if we think about systems as being founded on rules. And rules being something like the ever popular, you always pull twice as much as you push. Well, what happens when that's not the right approach for somebody? What do you do then? All right. So a rule is like 2 to 1. I always pull twice as much as I push. I always lower pull twice as much as I push. Things like that. All right. We put ourselves in a box as opposed to a principle to help guide our decision making. A rule is very fixed and it's very rigid. It doesn't allow for the gray area in between. We're thinking about principles. When I'm thinking about principles, I'm thinking about one of my beliefs: as strong as you need to be, not as you can be, unless as strong as you need to be is as strong as you can be. So when somebody comes to me, I know roughly how strong I need to get them based on their goals. I also believe in prioritizing outcomes over solutions. I utilize FRC. I utilize different flexibility and techniques, but I don't buy into any one technique, right? Those principles guide my decision making, but the systems that I've created help to streamline that decision making. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, we want to create a system that is built on mostly principles. And obviously, we're always going to have a few rules, but we'll talk about why I believe you should break your rules, but not your principles. So when we're thinking about implementing this framework in practice, we're thinking about the idea that strong systems create flexibility without chaos. All right. One thing I always like to talk about is there's this idea that I always like to say, is it data or is it noise? So if we look at Whoop and we look at a lot of, we brought this really athlete-centered approach and we brought it to Gen Pop. But when you look at the dashboards for a lot of these apps, Whoop and et cetera, things like that in particular, it's creating a lot of noise. All right. And if we can't do a lot with a lot of noise. Like, yeah, it's all just coming at us, but is that data actionable? Because that's really all I care about. How is this data informing my decisions moving forward to improve my performance or improve my health? That is all I care about. So what we're trying to do with this system that's based around principles, we're trying to create flexibility without chaos. A lot of times when we build a system, what happens is we try to fit the person into the system. So a good system should account for a wide continuum of goals and a wide continuum of people, right? Where are they coming in their journey? Are they in a position where they're looking to start their fitness? Or are they in a position where they're looking to develop their fitness? Or are they in a position where they're looking to optimize their fitness? Does that system allow for people coming in at different stages of their journey? Again, same thing, break your rules, not your principles. All right. So for me, let's say that I believe that you should pull twice as much as you push. I don't. But let's say I do. All right. So I get somebody and I'm like, this isn't right, but I believe you should always pull twice as much you push. Right. But one of my beliefs, again, is outcomes over solutions. Right. So I believe in, you know what am I trying to do for them? I'm not married to pulling twice as much you push. My principle on the hierarchy, my principles always come before my rules. My principles will always outweigh my rules. So I believe, you know what? We're going to ditch the pull twice as much as you push. Here's what we're going to do instead. Again, you can have your rules, but we need to learn to break our rules, not our principles. And a big thing is we need to know what we believe in when it comes to training. And when I talk about that, I'm not just talking about what John Rusin or what Coach Cassim believes when it comes to training. I'm talking about what you believe based on your experience working in the context of the environment with the primary client population that you work with. Sorry, just looking at the chat here to make sure we don't have any questions. All right, we will go next. So what we're going to get into now is what progressive overload actually is. All right, because a lot of y'all and a lot of folks that I meet with aren't actually thinking about the density side of things, and they're also not thinking about the speed side of things. Generally, we get a little too excessively fixated on the volume side of things. So what progressive overload is, it's volume. It's a degree or a measurement of the total work, sets, reps, tempo, things like that, time under tension. For my clients, I generally don't focus on the trying to implement the load equation into it. I generally like to think of that separately just because I like to simplify it a little more. So volume being total work, intensity being load of the movement, and the speed of the movement. Speed of the movement being something that we constantly forget. Then when we're thinking about density, we're thinking about work over time. We're talking about the amount of work performed in a set period of time. So we're thinking about volume, intensity, and density. Progressive overload is not random changes that do not support the goal or stimulus. And when I say that, again, remember at the beginning, I talked about that we don't have ropes coaches don't have a reproducible approach. Again, when we look at 10 different programs, there's not a common theme that we can pull out of each of those. So while we may have structure within that 4-week training phase, when you look at how we transition between training phases, it's still very random. So there's an issue there where the bottleneck is programming from a long-term perspective, right? So even though we're adding structure within this 4-week period, we want to think about, remember, moving the needle for a client from point A to point B is all about consistent inputs. creating consistent inputs. We always tell people, always talk about this. Everyone's like, I've tried everything. You've tried everything, but training 3 days a week for a minimum of 12 days a week with consistent inputs from week to week and from phase to phase. But the problem is if we don't have a consistent and reproducible and clear and structured approach for how we accomplish that stimulus, we're still creating random inputs. Felipe, yes, this is being recorded. So when we're thinking about progressive overload, everybody talks about Milo and the bull, right? Starts off super young, calf gets bigger, my dude gets jacked. I want to know what he's doing. All right, this is like Liver King shit right here. So we got volume. All right, we're thinking about volume. Typically, when we think about volume, you know, this isn't a presentation where we're going to get into thinking about how we approach hypertrophy and strength and stuff like that. But typically, when we think about volume, we're thinking about going from 3 sets of 8 at 70 to 3 sets of 10 at 70, right? Or from 3 sets of 8 at 70 to 4 sets of 8 at 70, right? We're just thinking about progressive overload. What we're not thinking about is increasing the time under tension. So something I like to do, right? Super simple, easy way to think about volume is 3 sets of 8 at 170 to 3 sets of 8 at 170 with a 4-second eccentric. I've increased the time under tension, super simple. I can do 3 sets of 8 with 1 1/4, right? So if we're thinking about squats, going down, up 1/4 of the way, back down, coming up. I can do time under tension with a pause at the bottom, 3-second pause on the bottom. Those are all different ways of increasing the time under tension without actually increasing the reps or the sets. This can be an extremely effective way for those of you who are thinking about online coaching, right? Who are thinking about online coaching. So how can we create a stimulus, right? How can we create a stimulus if somebody is limited by load? I have a client, he's been working with 50-pound dumbbells. Most he has is bands and 50-pound dumbbells for the past 4 years, right? You could say that he needs some more, but there's other ways that we can manipulate things to help him get a training effect and also meet him where he's at in terms of what he believes a successful workout is, right? Now, when we're thinking about intensity, we're thinking about more weight. Usually people will be like, hey, we're going to go from 4 sets of 5, all right, at 100 pounds to 4 sets of 5 at 110, right? Something like that. What about challenging them to move the barbell faster? Super simple, right? We just increase the intent that we're putting behind the barbell. I get clients all the time where we will not make the same changes, especially if somebody's closer. Let's say we're training for strength. We'll just use a super simple, everybody always talks about 5x5, right? Everybody talks about 5x5. Let's say that I see on that last set that they're like an RPE8. They're pretty close to failure. I have a couple things that I could do when I'm thinking about the idea of strength. I could increase the load, but we know that training excessively close to failure for too many weeks in a row isn't necessarily more beneficial compared to staying a few reps short of failure, right? Why don't I just say, hey, I want you to move the bar faster. I want you to put more intention behind the bar. That's intensity. That's manipulating intensity. Because now what I'm doing is I'm gamifying training. And if you looked at any of the research, there's a lot of benefits to be had by gamifying the training approach. I also utilize a lot of velocity-based training. And if a lot of you are familiar with velocity-based training, it's essentially where we put a little thing on the bar and we measure the speed that the bar is moving. So I can look at these numbers and I can say, hey, you are moving 0.60 meters per second. Next week, I want you to see if you can move that same weight for 0.65 meters per second. We're putting more intention behind the bar, right? More speed. Very simple way of creating progressive overload without actually making any changes to the sets, the reps, or the load. When we're thinking about density, use a lot of density. My clients love density circuits. And if you guys are familiar with density circuits, it's essentially an AMRAP, right? Greg, my guy just made it sound a lot better, right? It's essentially an AMRAP, 10-minute AMRAP. So we can say same amount of work in less time or more in same amount of time. So if I'm saying a 10-minute density circuit, I want you to do as many rounds of 5 back squats and 5 pull-ups as you can. Next week, all right, I want you to try and beat that. It's 10 minutes, 5 back squats, 5 pull-ups. You got 4 rounds last week. I want you to see if you can get 5. Or I could say, hey, last week, you got 4 rounds in 10 minutes. I want you to try and give me 4 rounds in 8 minutes. Very simple things that we can do, right? To again, think about creating progressive overload based on the stimulus or the goal we're trying to drive without necessarily manipulating the reps or the load. So does that make sense to everyone? Awesome. I forgot I can't see everyone. This is interesting. Thank you, Jermaine. So the takeaway, all right, is I want you to think about matching the method of overload to the stimulus you're trying to target. What is the goal? What are you trying to do? What is the primary stimulus you are trying to target? What is the primary stimulus that is going to have the biggest impact on getting your client from where they are to where they want to be? The exercise, and this is something I'm about to go into, the exercise is not the goal, the stimulus is. A lot of times we're getting excessively obsessed with thinking about the exercise, y'all. There are 10,000 ways to drive improvements in strength. It's not just an exercise thing. It's a sets, it's a reps, it's a speed. There are so many ways that we can think about driving a strength stimulus. But what happens, and the reason that program design takes us so long, is we're getting excessively attached to exercises instead of stimuli, right? So again, we want to think about our clients resonating, hey, strength, it's heavy loads, right? Like you could, again, there could be a case where you could say, you can make it into much bigger thing. But overall, it's like, hey, we want to get stronger, we got to lift some heavy shit. There's a million ways to do that. I can do a single leg goblet box squat. I can do a pistol squat. I can do a back squat. I can do a leg press. And then, yeah, we could get into, well, machines versus free weights. Why? This person's a 45-year-old accountant. Why are we making it harder? Why do we want to make this more complex than it really needs to be? We should layer complexity on an as needed basis. Layer complexity as needed. But a lot of times we're making it more complex than it needs to be. So when we're thinking about prioritizing the stimulus over the exercise, what we're doing is we're just leveraging exercises as vessels to deliver a stimulus and design programs that are both flexible and scalable. All right. What we are trying to, how often has it happened where your client's like, man, dude, I couldn't get on a squat rack. Like, I don't know what it is. So what happens, we've by saying, hey, back squats, this is the exercise we're training. No, back squats are just a way, if I'm thinking about somebody getting strong, hey, back squats are just a really great way of improving lower pushing strength. You know how many different ways there are that I could do that? The back squats are taken. All right, do a single leg goblet box squat. Do a pistol, like whatever. Obviously, we have to consider what their training age is and what they're capable of, but there are so many different ways of doing that. So what we've done is we've taught the client to be flexible within their training. Hey, you don't need to do back squats, right? If that's taken, it's all good. Let's less axial load, just do a single leg goblet squat, right? If we're thinking about lower strength, lower pushing strength, back squats, front squats, split squats, leg press, front squat, split. There are so many ways to skin the cat. But again, what's happening is we're getting excessively hung up. We're missing the forest for the trees. We're getting super zoned in on the exercise instead of zooming out and thinking about what is the stimulus I'm trying to produce? What am I trying to stimulate? Lower pushing strength. All right, there's a ton of different ways to do this. So what we can do using that approach, using a stimulus-based approach, we can use Everfit sections to reinforce the stimulus. And we think about it two ways. We can think about it from a general way, and we can also think about it from a specific way. From a general way, it could just be lower strength, upper hypertrophy, speed and power, right? Very general ideas. From a specific, we could get even more specific. We can do lower pulling strength, lateral speed, groin flexibility, glute hypertrophy, right? We can layer in these things. And what we do is we label these sections according to the stimulus we're trying to target. So what you've done is you've also managed the expectations of the client. The client knows exactly what they're doing. They're not saying, oh, I'm just doing heavy back squats. They're saying, oh, I'm doing lower pushing strength. Oh, okay. Well, that, and granted, assuming that you're educating your client along the way, what you're allowing for is flexibility. All right. You're giving them the education they need to do it on their own. So you can see very much, I have a lot of different sections that I've created here. Lower pulling power in this right next to the red. I have 5 different ways that I can do that. We can do reactive. We can do reflexive eccentrics. We can do reps for time where I just, hey, we're going to do RDLs, 5 second clock. I want you to give me as many reps as you freaking can, right? We can do reps for time with a band. We can just do controlled, which is just like, hey, I want you to drop and come up as quickly as possible. There are a million different ways. What matters is that they are all just different ways of driving lower power. That is it. That is absolutely it. When we look to the far left, lactic capacity or lactic power, all these are just ways of trying to drive lactic power. If we think about hip mobility in the top left, these are all just different ways that I've created of trying to improve hip mobility. If we're thinking about lengthening the hamstring, we're thinking about creating length through the groin, we're thinking about creating length through the hip flexor. When we're talking about, we can get into speed and power. Most of my clients come to me for a lot of athleticism, a lot of dynamic movement. So we're not just thinking about speed and power. We have linear speed and power. We have lateral speed and power. We have curvilinear speed and power. So they're able to associate, what is the stimulus? What are we working on? We're just working on linear speed and power. It just needs to be this way, not too hard, right? If we look at the top right, you see my dynamic core series. We're just working on bending and twisting. Dynamic core series, my clients know dynamic means movement. We're creating movement, not resisting movement, right? I have a dynamic GHD core and spine series. Again, what I'm doing is I'm creating and managing expectations. So why does stimulus-based design works? Oh man, my GIF isn't working. Oh, at least it freezed on a really good face. So it's easier for clients to understand, right? It's just easier for clients to understand, like, oh, this is lower. This is easy. Like I can get down with this. This is awesome. And it preserves the intent across the training cycle. So when you are going to program the next training phase, you're not thinking about, oh man, what do I do? We just did back squats. Should I manipulate the set? Should I do like what should I do? You're doing lower strength. Pick something, right? Just pick something, right? It doesn't necessarily also always have to be a progression. I frequently, and you can ask any of my clients that are also on this call that can probably attest to this, the NEEC in general, I frequently have clients revisit old exercises and old warm-ups, right? Because of the way I'm thinking about it is, especially if it was possibly a new kind of exercise, what happens is we spend the first 4 weeks maybe trying to learn the exercise, right? And hopefully by week 4, we kind of reach this autonomous stage of executing the movement where we don't have to think about anything. When they revisit that, what we're doing is we're creating and establishing a win. Because when they revisit that, they're going to remember, last time I did that movement, it took me 4 weeks to get down. Now on week 1, I got it down already. We're going to be able to squeeze that much more out of the movement, especially when we think about the idea of intensity drives adaptation. And if somebody is in that very cognitive or associative stage of thinking, when we're talking about that, we're thinking about, they're thinking about cognitive, they're thinking about shoulder blades back, chin up, sternum this way, feet this way. They're thinking about so many things. So that is automatically going to put a governor on the intensity. And the less things they think about, the more intensity that they can execute the exercise to, and the more they're going to be able to squeeze out as far as the stimulus goes. So when they revisit that exercise, we're establishing a win. We're also going to be able to squeeze that much more juice out of that movement. So not only is it easier for clients to understand, it preserves the intent across the training cycle. So we want to make sure, if I'm trying to improve somebody's strength and power, I want to make sure that I'm improving, that I'm getting a strength and power stimulus for 6 straight months, 1 straight year, whatever it is. Ultimately, it comes down to the following, y'all. We're trying to provide clients with the education they need to do it on their own. And this is very important, the level of service that makes them not want to. That is what it's all about. And that is a big thing that is missing in the online coaching world. One of the best things that ever happened to me was serving tables for 5 years. One of the best things I ever did, because it taught me how to really take a service-based approach to my clients. And a lot of people are like, well, if I give them this is what we always get onto Kairos for, right? Kairos, a lot of times Kairos are sometimes, especially in small towns where I'm from, could possibly be notorious for, convincing someone that they always need a fix up, like a little twist to feel good. Next thing you know, it's been 3 years and you should be able to graduate beyond that, right? We want to give our clients the education they need, that if you are actively from an education point of view, trying to put yourself out of a job by giving them the education they need to do it on their own, but the level of service that makes them not want to. When we talk about the level of service, we're going to get into some things that you can do to give a high level and elite coaching service. So, big thing that we can also do is we can think about building buckets. All right, we can categorize clients into specific goal buckets. So if you're taking a performance-based approach, do most people, if you're a hybrid or a hybrid, are most people just coming to you for a very basic strength and conditioning? Strength and conditioning. Are they coming to you for fat loss, hypertrophy, athletic performance? What I've noticed with myself is most people come to me for a combination of two things, either strength and athleticism or strength and athleticism and conditioning. That is what most people, majority, 90% of my clients come to me for. So I've been able to put these into buckets and think about what is the consistent way that I approach the development of strength and athleticism or strength, athleticism, conditioning. And can I create a system that allows me to think about where are they at in their journey of trying to develop strength and athleticism or strength, athleticism, and conditioning, and then being able to integrate them seamlessly into my system while still being able to individualize their program at scale. So what happens is once we've built these buckets based on what clients most often come to us for, we can create these general templates, all right? And in the freebie that you guys will be able to get at the end, because this is always the inevitable question that everyone gets. They're like, wait, templates, I don't want to build from templates, then it's not individualized. And that would assume that you're relinquishing the ability to modify the more specific elements that make up each of these sections. Who says that I can't change the individual exercises that make up my movement prep? The individual exercises that make up my primary strength or power. So what you're going to see here is you guys can ignore the build. But if I get someone who comes to me for strength and athleticism, their training frequency is 3 days. We're going to do a full body split. Every workout is going to start with a mobility workout. Every workout is going to start out with what I call an athletic dynamic warm-up. And the reason I call it athletic dynamic warm-up is to, again, frame it in their mind of what we're trying to do. It's not just a dynamic warm-up, it's an athletic dynamic warm-up. And that could be something where it's like, not really, but to the client, they're like, oh, okay, this stuff addresses my goals. This stuff addresses, and it does, right? Then we're always going to go either into a speed and power or a jump series. My speed and power series will always be a sprint series, or they're going to go into a jump series, followed by a primary strength or power or an accessory block. If you train with me 3 days and you're coming to me for strength and hypertrophy, we're doing a full body split. You'll always start with some type of mobility warm-up, a movement prep, which is different, right? Because what I've done with this is I made sure that each block we're creating consistent inputs from phase to phase. I always approach it the same way every single time. If you're coming to me for strength and hypertrophy and we're training 3 days using a full body split, I'm maintaining the intent across the training cycles. So we'll go into a primary strength or power, a secondary strength or power, and then we'll go into hypertrophy. I could call it accessory, but I'm not going to just call it accessory. I want them to know for a fact that this block is addressing their goals. So templates add structure. They stop creating noise and they start creating, biggest thing is reproducible results, because a lot of y'all are adding structure, but when you're training, when you're changing phases, we're not able to create reproducible results. So what we do is we ensure that the stimulus remains and the methods evolve. And that's what I talked about, layering complexity on a as needed basis. So if we go back to the sections, lower pulling power, that's like step 1 for improving power. Next, we're going to add bands. Next, we're going to do speed, which is, hey, 5 seconds, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, as many reps as you can. Then we're going to add banded speed. Now we're adding a band to it, up, down, up, down, up, down. Then we're going to do reflexive eccentrics. Then we're going to do reactive. The methods evolve, but I still maintain the stimulus across the training cycles. Jason, do you typically use full body split over your clients, or is this just for 3 times a week clients? It's very much dependent, but I will say that I do definitely tend to bias either a lower upper, if either a lower upper split, because I'll even do lower upper with 3 days, especially I'll do ABA. Next week will BAB, ABA, BAB. But I do tend to prioritize. Most of my clients train with me 3 days. I'm a big fan of the 3-day cycle, especially because I'm a big proponent of intensity drives adaptation. So I find that a lot of the people come to me are of a higher training age. So I tend to focus more on the intensity side of things as opposed to volume. And 3 days really allows us to do that. Hopefully that answers your question. 20 different clients does not mean 20 different programs. All right. It's just three programs with a very nuanced delivery. You're modifying the very unique elements that make up each block. So here's the goal. With zero context, and this is where the reproducible and consistent way that you approach the development of strength, power, hypertrophy, et cetera, comes in. The goal is that with zero context, your client should be able to look at a workout and tell you exactly what the goal of it is by looking at the sets, reps, rest, tempo, notes, etc. If we took out the label for each section, would they be able to look at your workouts and know exactly what that block is doing? Would they be able to look at the workout as a whole and know exactly what that day is doing? Would they know exactly what the week is moving them towards? That is the goal. That's the goal. All right, y'all. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the master planner in action. So we're going to think about how we utilize this from a day-to-day and a week-to-week feature. So what I've done is I have, 1 second, I'm going to share my screen. All right, so can everybody see this? Back to tab. Somebody give me a heads up. All right, cool, awesome. All right, y'all. So what we've done here, all right, is we have day 1, day 2, and day 3. So we're going to pretend that this person has come to me for strength and hypertrophy. I'm just going to visit this because I've never used this. So I just want to make sure it's not blocking anything. Okay, cool. So what we're doing is we have, let's pretend 3 days, somebody's come to me for strength, power, and hypertrophy. I'm a big fan of focusing on a single, for the most part, like 1 or 2 stimulus for the day. So what we've done is we can move to our master planner feature. Move that over there. We will go to June 30th and we will go by day. Now, what I can do is if I'm thinking about, because periodization and especially with the day by day thing is we're thinking about how are we managing fatigue and stress from an acute perspective. When we're thinking about acute perspective, we're thinking about a day to day. So I can look at this and be like, hey, if this day is called strength, what are the loads? Are the stimulus that I'm exposing into, is that indicative of a stimulus that is going to drive strength? If I'm thinking about a power day, I'm looking at this. I'm a big fan of implementing a jump series and some body weight yielding plyos and stuff like this to improve power, because nothing is going to give you as many watts. I don't care how much weight you put on the barbell. Nothing is going to give you as much watts as just a simple jump as high as you freaking can, jump as far as you can, jump this way as far as you can. So I very much like to, in a power day, I'm taking out the movement prep and I'm implementing a jump series. So what I'm thinking about, if this day is hypertrophy, this is power, this is strength, is there a clear dichotomy? Do the loads, do the exercises, do the sets, does the way that I'm approaching it, do the notes, are those reflective of a stimulus that is going to improve strength, that is going to improve power, and that is going to improve hypertrophy? So if I'm thinking about a week by week perspective, and I'm thinking about strength, right? I'm thinking about progressive overload. What I can do is I can, and sometimes I do proactively, what will happen is I will proactively program weeks ahead of time. So if I'm thinking about this as week 2, I'm thinking about, okay, well, I know that if I'm trying to improve strength, I'm thinking about intensity. I either want to, for me, because most of my clients have no need to do more than 3 working sets of a movement to improve strength. No need. They also don't want to. Most people are like, I have zero desire to do more than 3 sets of anything. I'm going to be completely honest. I'm cool with it. So knowing that, and also thinking about we only have a 60-minute workout, when I look at this, okay, maybe we go to RPE7. I'm just going to take a super simple linear periodization approach. Now, let's say I do that, or I could say, hey, I'm going to go in here, and instead of doing for the high handle deadlift, instead of moving this to RPE7, the only note I'm going to make is move the bar faster. That's it, right? Because I'm getting a higher degree of motor unit coordination. That is going to improve strength. So from a week by week, I can think about what is the stimulus I'm trying to drive? Strength, power, speed, hypertrophy. And are the progressions, am I approaching progressive overload in a way that is going to accomplish that and is also very simple and easy to understand? So it's just a way when we're thinking about the day-by-day feature and the week-by-week feature, I can look at, is there also when I'm looking at my template, because I use, if any of you don't use a second screen for program design, I'm telling you, there's a programming hack. Carl can attest to this. He's on this call. If there's a programming hack, get yourself a second screen. It is life-changing. Absolutely life-changing. I used to program a lot of, I used to work at Tonal. If any of you are all familiar with that, I was on the program design team. They exposed the engineering team. Life-changing. So again, I can look at this and be like, how am I managing stress from day to day? And from week to week, how am I managing stress from a chronic perspective, from a week to week perspective, and what is happening? And I can look at over time, as I gather more and more data, I can look at this and be like, okay, what happened? What worked? What did not work? They reported we really didn't get that much stronger over the past 12 weeks. What happened? Does that make sense to everybody? Lauren, you have 3 screens. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna. Looks like the presentation went away. Rob, are we able to load that presentation up, or should I just? Awesome. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. So when we're thinking about the master planner, again, think about it in the context of day to day. We're thinking about how are we managing stress from an acute perspective, and from week to week, how are we managing stress from a chronic perspective? We're always thinking about the relationship between the accrual of acute to chronic stress. And especially when we're thinking about this, because we always want to look at the acute workload, increase in workload compared to the chronic increase in workload. And for over a 4-week phase is based on this person's work capacity and what they can tolerate. Are we exposing them to an excessive degree of workload increase from week to week? Does that explain maybe the knee niggles that they were talking about, right? So when we go to this, let's go. We should be able to land perfectly on time. So periodization, we're just thinking about leveraging stress in the form of training to drive adaptation and managing stress in the form of recovery to maximize intensity. The goal is to be recovered more often than not. The goal is not to be constantly recovering. And I'm not this, and what that allows me to do is I'm not demonizing the idea that I'm not demonizing you being always recovered or demonizing you being recovering, right? Because we don't want to say, oh man, like you're sore. That's a bad thing. We want to learn from that information. But ultimately, a good program should leave us recovered more often than we are recovering. And if we are spending more time recovering, and we know recovery is a very holistic, it's soreness, it's HRV, it's a million different factors, right? It's fatigue, it's what is your mental fortitude? What do those things look like? The goal with periodization and the master planner feature is to allow you to put a finger on the pulse of how am I managing stress? And is this based on how they're responding? Are we spending more time recovered or more time recovering? And if we're spending more time recovering, then we need to make some modifications to our programming moving forward. Zoe, so you asked, how are you using Master Planner with the client results? You briefly touched on it, but maybe you can expand on it. How do you know the workload increase is appropriate or not? Self-reported data or check-ins? So we're going to get into this. Okay, we're going to get into this couple slides, but it's very much in taking a responsive approach to programming. Okay, we're not thinking about how people are going to respond based on how we think they will or based on how a book tells they will. We're thinking about how they're actually responding based on pain, based on soreness, based on all these different touch points. So responsive coaching using a task feature. Zoe, you crushed it. I love that question. All right. We're adjusting based on how the client actually responds and not how we think they will in a perfect world. So I work with a lot of clients in pain. They don't necessarily go to a physical therapist. The way I kind of monitor, is this excessive? Is the workload excessive based on whether we're trying to address, calf pain or hip pain, whatever it is, lower back pain? is I have them rate the next day pain on a scale of 0 to 10. If it's 4 or less, that's usually discomfort. We can proceed as planned with the next week with what I had planned. If it's greater than a 4, that is usually pain, and I need to address and modify the workload the next week. So when I'm thinking about this, 1 second, I will pull up, because DJ is really good for this. Metrics. So 1 second. So you'll see right here that what I have is this is one of my clients, and we're working with a lot of things. All right, we're working on knee pain, we're working on ankle pain, we're working on knee swelling. So I can track these things over time, and I can even look at the last 6 months, and I can look at how is his pain. If you notice, his ankle pain was a big thing that we are trying to address. You can notice we've slowly seen a steady decrease in ankle pain over time. There's a few spikes here. And then, so we responded accordingly, adjusted the workload. All right. So what I like to do is when I'm thinking about tasks, for example, what I do is I have people, I put it as a task the next day, and I have them rate their pain on a scale of 0.1, because we can't input 0 for Everfit, 0 to 10. If it's a 4 out of 10 or less, we are good. If it's more than a 4, I need to adjust the workload. Rob, if you could, please pull the presentation back up. I can also just, thanks, man. We're thinking about lower body soreness. I'm doing the same thing. I have a scale for lower body soreness. Rate the next day's soreness on a scale of 0 to 10. If it's a 3 or less, proceed as planned. If it's greater than a 4, I need to address and modify the volume. And for each of these numbers, I have a very subjective description. Is it sore to the touch? Is it sore walking on flat land? Is it sore going upstairs? What are you feeling? I need to get a finger on the pulse so I can take a responsive approach to how you are feeling. Now, for feedback surveys, all right, we also have at the end of every 4 weeks, because I want to make sure that I give my clients agency over how their program evolves over time. What do you want to start doing? Was there something you saw on Instagram? Was there something that you really want to start doing? And then let's make coaching as a collaborative effort. What do you want to do? All right. Sometimes they're adding a little too much to the mix. Hey, we need to focus on these things for now. Let's let's put this thing in the parking lot, and we will revisit once we've really nailed these things down. What do you want to stop doing? Was there a movement you hated? I do. I have clients that sometimes are like, dude, if I never have to do another lunge again, that'd be great. And I'm like, well, no, right? What do you want to keep doing? Is there anything that you really loved? What did you love about this phase? Because I want to make sure that I inject more of those elements into the programs that come up. And how do you feel about your progress? I'm constantly getting a finger on the pulse of how they feel about their progress. I'm constantly gathering testimonials to make and ensure that not only am I injecting their feedback into their future programs, but I'm also ensuring that they are happy with the service that they are receiving. And I'm not saying, sometimes there are times where it's like, yeah, I just didn't see as much progress this phase. Okay, you know what? If you look at the consistency just definitely wasn't there this phase. Let's, in the next 4-week phase, let's see if we can really hone in on getting 3 days a week, every single week. There's different things, again, creating a collaborative effort and ensuring that they know that they are being heard. And I don't want to do Zoom calls and stuff like that. So this allows me to do that without the constant need for Zoom calls. So why am I only asking for lower body soreness? Because right now there's really only a scientifically validated method of establishing or measuring lower body soreness. Upper body soreness, there isn't, as far as I know. So that is why I do not rate upper body soreness. Everybody always asks that question, and it's a very good question. Next, again, this comes down to break your rules, not your principles. Take a responsive approach to programming. That's the difference between programming and coaching. Just because you proactively program those weeks ahead of time does not mean that they need to stay that way. Consider how your client is responding to the training that you are giving them. I'm also a big HRV guy. I have a lot of my clients, I get a lot of extremely high performers. I have a lot of coaches and trainers that I coach. So we do a lot of different parameters related to HRV. Big thing, man. if you know this movie, You Are My People, man, this GIF would have really, really slapped. Ultimately, what it comes down to, y'all, I want you to all just stop entertaining and start programming. So next phase, all right? Next, want y'all to go ahead, break out your phones. So what I've done is created super simple. I want y'all to help. I want to help y'all with your program design. I want you to help you design your own structures and systems based on your philosophies using a bucketed approach. So a lot of this stuff that we went over today, this freebie is going to go way in depth on it. So if you just get out your phone, scan it using your camera, it'll take you to my website, scroll down to the bottom, put in your first name, last name, email, and then you will get it sent in your email. And my hope, again, is that, let me see, there is. 1, 2, and I will go ahead. Should have had that pulled up here. I will get that. What I'll do is I'll see if I can input that into a link in the email that we'll send out with the recording. Interesting that it's not going to it. Let me see if I can get it. Yeah, I'll get that sent out for y'all. It worked. Oh, awesome! Thank you, Katie. You are awesome. Thank you. And that is it. Hey, thank you everyone that helped me out with that. Thank you for the assist. I don't know what was going on my side. But yeah, if y'all can scan that, we got the link right here. You guys can copy that. Thank you, Rob, for having me. Sorry I couldn't get, we do have some time. I don't know how long this will go, but I do have time to stay and ask any questions, etc.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of extra time as well. So if anyone wants to stick around, we do have a couple of questions in the chat if we want to go through it, and I'm happy to read them out for you, Josh. So
how do I scale? What was it? How do you scale with all the testimonials and feedback? Patricia, I'm not sure what you do. You mean like how I utilize them?
Yeah, we'll circle back to that one. Because hopefully Patricia can add some more context in there.
Yeah.
But the next one is, what do you do in the case of a client wanting to train 5 days a week, only taking days off over the weekend, due to her schedule and her attachment to feeling better on days she goes to the gym? It doesn't leave much time for recovery.
So when utilizing a 5-day split, I'm a big fan of still using 3 days of resistance training and 2 days of conditioning. So what that would look like is I would, just like you saw with me, I might do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, our strength, power, hypertrophy, maybe just based on what they came to me. And this is me just spitballing. And days Tuesday and Thursday are conditioning. And I'm a big fan of getting people exposure to a variety of volumes and intensities within their conditioning. So, and I also noticed that a lot of people, me included, really like when they go into the gym. I just wanted to strength train, or I just want to do conditioning. So that's been something that's really worked well for a lot of people. I also have, for example, one client where he's doing like 8 or 10 hours of dancing right now. So he just wanted a day. He's only training 3 days a week, where he just left feeling better than when he walked in. So in those cases, it's where, and granted, we can get into this, right, where active recovery is not technically a thing. Like if you're in the gym, you are accruing some type of stress, but the goal was really just to get them in the movement, get them in the gym. So we're doing a lot of concentric only biased work, a lot of isos, a lot of dynamic stretching stuff, like little things like that can help manage fatigue, but also leave him feeling better than when he walked in, especially with the isometric stuff having an analgesic effect as it relates to pain, the dynamic stretching stuff relating to addressing some of that stiffness. So there's definitely a lot of ways to help meet them where they're at.
Sweet. All right. Next question from Lewis. Do you build out template meso macro cycles, potentially accumulation, intensification, realization, for example? And if so, how do you store that on Everfit?
So it's a great question, Lewis, and I do not. When I've worked with athletes, when I worked at the collegiate level and stuff like that, you know exactly what their schedule is going to be. So you can program 12, 14 weeks ahead of time. You can't do that with 99.9% of our clients, right? It's kind of like a planned deload. Like I don't love planning deloads, because usually all of a sudden a client's gonna be like, yo, I'm leaving tomorrow for a week. And I'm like, okay, well, there's a deload. So a big thing is I actually program as I go. to be completely honest with you. It's very hard. I've found it very hard, where I'll put in a ton of work proactively creating a macro outline for future months just for it to get absolutely obliterated or blown up. So I love that approach. I think it works really well. It's just very much based on each individual client and what their schedule looks like and if they are very regimented.
Cool. Just circling back to Patricia's question. So she said that, like, how do you scale programming? So I think when she meant the feedback and the responses, if you have 25 plus clients and each has different feedback, how do you take on more clients and also have time to read and read that feedback, and I'm assuming make those adjustments?
So that's a great question. So you will always have two types of clients. You'll have people where I give them the survey and it's like, what do you want to start doing? They're nothing. What do you want to stop doing? Love it all. What do you want to keep doing? Nothing. How do you feel about your progress? Great. And then you have another end of the spectrum, which is like entire paragraphs, right? And so I record all those responses. So I also utilize a Google Drive feature. So I have a column and a tab. I have a folder for each client. And I have a column for what do you want to start, stop, keep doing, and how do you feel about your progress, as well as any notes that I make within that progress. If they noted any pain, I will add those things within that column. And I will also label it according to whatever phase they're in. For me, I do a lot of metabolic and neural phases. So it would be called like metabolic 1, intensify 1, metabolic 2, intensify 2, or intensification 2, something like that. So what I can do is I can see all their individual responses from phase to phase. And then what I've done is I'll take a lot of that and I can use AI to help me craft a kind of profile of a client as far as things that I need to make sure that I prioritize moving forward, things that I always need to stay away from. Like this client said they absolutely hate this. So if you could never do that again, that'd be great. Like little stuff like that allows me to make sure, and I'll always refer to that document before I sit down in the program. Because the worst thing, and this has happened before, right, is the worst thing a client hates is they told you that this movement hurts them, but you keep giving it to them. Or they told you they don't have access to kettlebells, but why did you program something for kettlebells? It's frustrating because it feels like you're not listening and they are not being heard. So that is a great question, because it's thinking about, okay, you're taking this in, but how are you actually making the data, again, actionable, or is it just noise? So what I want to do is any data that I extract, I need to ensure that it's actionable and that I'm creating the confines and the structure that allows me to apply it to give them a better service.
Awesome. All right. We'll just go one or two more questions before we jump, because I know we're over. So Miranda has said, for the pain metric, is the client able to rate that on their end, or does the coach update it each workout or each week?
So they rate it on their end. So I assign it as a task the next day, always the next day, because I want to allow for the recovery period to set in to really get an accurate assessment of what did they feel? What sensations did that generate? Was it too much, too little, or just right? What does that Goldilocks zone look like?
Cool. And last one, not so much a question, but Ali said she'd be very curious to see your check-in process slash system and organization. And I would say reach out to you, Josh, and scan that code. And I'd say that's probably something you two can potentially connect offline about.
Yeah, so I actually don't do Zoom check-ins. So everything I maintain I give all my feedback via Loom, and then together with the pain assessments, the lower body soreness assessments, the end of phase feedback, and then our constant touch points throughout the week via Loom, it negates the need to meet on Zoom. If there's anything I learned working in corporate for a year, it's that could have been an email.
Awesome. All right. Well, on that note, thank you so much again, Josh. I mean, you can see it in the comments. Really, really great presentation. Everyone took a lot away. I know I've even picked up a couple of tidbits along the way as well. So yeah, for everyone, we will send out an email in the next sort of 36 or so hours. It'll have a copy of the slides, the recording. We'll add the links, and then even drop in a few bits of educational material around the master planner and things like that as well. So keep an eye out for that email coming through. And yeah, thanks again, Josh.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.
Later, y'all.